Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something we all experience or think about but maybe don't fully understand pleasure, the big O.
Right?
We all kind of think we know the score, right?
Yeah.
But what does the actual data tell us? Our mission today is to really unpack the secrets behind orgasms for men and women using a whole stack of research. Think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely clued in on this pretty intimate topic.
Absolutely. And we're here to lay out these insights based purely on the data. The goal isn't just information, it's empowerment. Empowering you with real knowledge about human sexuality, looking at different angles, connecting some dots, maybe challenging a few assumptions along the way.
Okay, get ready then, because some of this might surprise you right out of the gate. For instance, this orgasm gap. Huge finding. Most men usually climax, but like almost a third of women often don't during partnered sex.
That's a major point, yeah.
And for women who think they've never had one, the research offers real hope. It shows something like 9 out of 10 women can get there with the right support or treatment.
It really does. It suggests it's often about understanding, not, a fundamental inability.
And it seems like how is key. Most women need direct clitoral stimulation, right? Not just penetration.
Exactly. Which is such a contrast to how effective masturbation is for many women.
Right. Oh, and here's a fun one. Experts apparently recommend at least 3 orgasms a week for stress relief for everyone.
That's what some recommend, yes. A potentially enjoyable prescription. And speaking of how they happen, what about duration? You hear different things. Are male and female orgasms really that different in length?
Good question.
Well, the data suggests male orgasms can be pretty short, sometimes just a few seconds, maybe up to nearly a minute in some cases. Female orgasms, though, tend to last longer. On average, maybe 17 to 35 seconds is a common range cited.
So the perception, male ones quicker, stronger, female ones longer, maybe less intense sometimes. That kind of aligns.
That's often the perception, and the duration data seems to somewhat support that general idea, yeah.
Okay, that gives us a baseline. Let's dive deeper into those core differences then. How often are men and women actually reaching orgasm during partnered sex, according to the numbers?
Okay, well, the numbers are pretty stark. When you ask about orgasming, almost always during intercourse, over 95% of men say yes.
95%.
But for women, that number drops way down. It's only about 25%.
25? That's a huge gap.
It is. And if you ask about the last time they had sex, it's still quite different. Over 90% of men orgasmed, but just under 2/3 of women did. About 64%, 65% depending on the study.
So not even 2 out of 3 women last time, compared to almost all men. And what's really interesting is how men perceive this.
Right, the perception gap.
Yeah, studies show about half of men seem to think women orgasm around 60% of the time during intercourse, which, as you just said, isn't quite hitting the mark.
Not really, no. It overestimates the reality for many women.
So if penetration alone isn't the primary path for most women, what does the research point to? What's needed?
This really gets to the heart of the orgasm gap, and a lot of it fundamentally is about anatomy. Men are reported to be like 280% more likely to say they almost always orgasm during intercourse compared to women. It's a massive difference.
280%.
Yeah. And the key insight is the clitoris. It has around 8,000 nerve endings, and for most women, that's the epicenter for orgasm. Vaginal penetration can feel good, definitely, but it often doesn't provide enough of that direct clitoral stimulation.
Makes sense.
In fact, the data shows only about 18%, maybe 18.4% of women consistently orgasm from intercourse without any simultaneous clitoral stimulation.
Only 18%. That really reframes the conversation around sex, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Focusing solely on intercourse might be missing the point for a lot of women.
Precisely. It opens up that whole discussion about what satisfying sex really involves for both partners. Communication becomes vital.
Absolutely. So building on that, what about the women who report never having experienced an orgasm? What do the numbers tell us about their situation?
Yeah, that's a significant experience for some. Around 8.5% of women in surveys say they've never had an orgasm. That number can fluctuate a bit, maybe 5 to 12%, depending on the study.
Still a notable percentage.
It is. But here's the really positive part. Around 92% of those women do eventually manage to achieve orgasm after getting clinical treatment or targeted guidance.
92%. That's incredible. It really reinforces that it's often about learning and understanding your body.
Exactly. It's not usually an inherent biological block for most people. It's often about knowledge, technique, reducing anxiety, things like that.
And is it more common in younger women?
We do see that, yes. One study found about 12% of women aged 17 to 28 reported never having had an orgasm yet.
Yeah.
And looking specifically at vaginal intercourse, about 30% of women say they rarely or never orgasm that way.
Okay, so there's definite potential for discovery there. This brings up another factor. How does sexual orientation fit into this picture? Does who you're intimate with affect orgasm rates?
Oh, it definitely does. And the findings, especially for women, are really quite striking. A large meta-analysis looked at this. Let's break down the orgasm rates from the last sexual encounter. Heterosexual men, again, way up there at 95%.
Okay.
Heterosexual women, they were the least likely group at 65%.
65, that's the gap we talked about.
Exactly. Now look at gay individuals. Homosexual men orgasmed 89% of the time, and homosexual women, 86%. Almost as likely as gay men.
86% for lesbians. That's much higher than heterosexual women.
Much higher. Then you have bisexual individuals. Bisexual men were at 88%, slightly lower than gay or straight men. And bisexual women were at 66%, very similar to heterosexual women.
So looking at those comparisons.
Yeah, heterosexual men are about 42% more likely to orgasm than heterosexual women. But here's a key comparison. Homosexual women are 32% more likely to orgasm than either heterosexual or bisexual women.
Wow. So for women, sexual orientation seems to be a much bigger factor in orgasm frequency than it is for men.
The data strongly suggests that, yes, it really makes you pause and think about assumptions regarding sexual practices and focus within different relationship dynamics.
Definitely. And what about asexuality? Does that automatically mean no orgasms?
No, not necessarily. Research found that 77% of asexual women reported having had an orgasm at some point. So identifying as asexual doesn't preclude that experience.
That's really important clarification. Okay, so orientation matters. What about relationship dynamics? Does being in a committed relationship versus, say, a casual hookup change things?
Oh, absolutely. Relationship status and familiarity have a huge impact, particularly for women. Look at this. During a very first hookup with someone new, only about 11% of women orgasm.
11%, that's low.
Very low. It bumps up a little to maybe 16% if it's the first or second hookup, but you start seeing a real shift after 3 or more hookups, it jumps to 34%.
Okay, so getting more comfortable, maybe better communication starts to play a role.
Exactly. It's likely a mix of factors: comfort, communication, learning each other's bodies, trust. And the really dramatic increase comes when women are in relationships lasting over 6 months. Then, about 67% report orgasming.
67%. So they're like 6 times more likely to orgasm in a longer relationship than in a first-time hookup.
That's what the numbers show, yes.
Yeah.
6 times more likely.
That's massive.
It is. And the odds keep improving. The third to fifth hookup improves chances by about 40% compared to the first. And having 6 or more hookups with the same person essentially doubles the chances compared to that initial encounter.
It really paints a clear picture. Time, trust, and understanding really matter for female pleasure.
Vitally important ingredients, yes.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So digging into the how a bit more, how do specific sexual activities influence the likelihood of orgasm, especially for women? What actually works best according to the research?
Right, let's break that down. First off, arousal is absolutely key for women. Lack of sufficient arousal can even make penetration painful, let alone pleasurable.
Good.
Now, specific acts. Self-stimulation, so masturbation during partnered sex, that makes women over 2 times more likely to orgasm, whether it's a hookup or a relationship.
Okay, direct control.
Partner using their hand for stimulation, also very effective, over twice as likely in hookups and twice as likely in relationships.
Makes sense. Targeting the clitoris.
Exactly. Interestingly, if the woman is stimulating her partner with her hands, her own odds of orgasming still increase by about 1.6 to 1.8 times.
Huh. Interesting feedback loop, perhaps.
Could be. Now, receiving oral sex, this makes women almost twice as likely to orgasm in hookups, but it has the biggest impact in established relationships, almost 3 times more likely.
3 times. So oral sex really shines in relationships.
It seems to, yes. Performing oral sex on a partner only seems to increase the woman's chances slightly, and mostly just in relationships. And anal sex doesn't really increase the odds in hookups, according to this data, but it does by about 1.6 times in relationships.
So the takeaway seems to be, in relationships, receiving oral sex is a major booster, while as hookups, maybe hand stimulation from a partner has the most reliable impact.
That's a good summary of what this particular data suggests, yeah.
It really underscores that focus on clitoral attention. What about activities done solo or specific tools? Masturbation on its own.
Yeah, let's look closer at masturbation. It's incredibly effective for most people. Over 92% of women and nearly 99% of men say they can orgasm this way.
Almost everyone.
Pretty much. And get this, almost 83% of women report their first ever orgasm happened through masturbation.
83%. Wow.
Yeah. And compare this, 40% of women say they always orgasm when they masturbate alone, but only 6% say they always orgasm during intercourse.
40% versus 6%. That comparison alone says so much.
It really does. Now, anal sex, briefly, one specific study found 100% of men and 94% of women orgasmed while receiving it. High numbers in that context.
Okay. And oral sex again.
Receiving oral sex makes women about 23% more likely to orgasm during subsequent intercourse in that session.
So it helps set the stage, too.
Seems like it. And it's common. Nearly 90% of men have performed it, and almost all of them say they enjoy it.
Good to know. What about vibrators?
Very common. About 69% of women have used one. And here's a neat finding for heterosexual women. If she feels her partner enjoys her using a vibrator, that's a significant predictor of her overall sexual satisfaction.
Partner acceptance matters.
It seems so. And when women are asked directly what kind of stimulation they prefer during intercourse to help them orgasm, almost half say their partner's hand or mouth.
Okay. Manual or oral?
About 37% prefer using their own hands for that direct control. And nearly 30% prefer using vibrators or other sex toys during intercourse.
So lots of variation, but that direct, targeted stimulation keeps coming up.
It's the consistent theme, yes.
Right.
A multifaceted approach is often best.
Fascinating data. Let's touch on a couple of less discussed areas now. Orgasms without direct physical stimulation like wet dreams. Are those just a male thing?
Not at all, actually. Research shows about 37% of women under 45 have experienced sleep orgasms.
37%.
Yep. Which is remarkably close to the 38% of men who recall having them, especially in their teenage years.
Huh. Much more common for women than I think most people realize. Okay, now for a potentially awkward but important topic. Faking orgasms.
Right. The numbers here are quite telling.
We mentioned it briefly earlier. Significantly more women than men.
Yes. Nearly 60% of women admit to having faked an orgasm at some point. For men, it's around 25%.
So more than double for women. Why?
Yeah.
What are the reasons given?
The most common reason cited by women, about 42% of them, is to avoid hurting their partner's feelings.
Ah, the emotional labor aspect.
It often points to that, or perhaps performance pressure, or just wanting the encounter to end. It's complex.
And you mentioned a surprising link to income.
That was a fascinating finding, yes. Women who earn more money than their male partners were found to be more than twice as likely to have faked an orgasm.
Wow. Any theories on why that might be?
The study didn't definitively say, but speculation involves relationship dynamics, power balances, maybe expectations. It's intriguing.
Definitely. And has this become more common over time?
It appears so. Some comparisons suggest rates went from maybe 57% back in the 70s up to around 75% in studies from the mid-2010s.
So more faking, or maybe just more willingness to admit it?
Could be a bit of both. But despite it being common, it's not always done happily. About 7% of women felt annoyed they had to do it, and a quarter admit they sometimes fake it.
It really highlights that communication gap again, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Faking prevents addressing the actual issue.
Exactly. It's a temporary fix that avoids the real conversation about mutual pleasure.
Okay, let's shift to timing. How long does it typically take people to orgasm, and how long does the orgasm itself last? We touched on duration earlier.
Right. The timing is important context. For men, the average time to ejaculate or orgasm during partnered sex is around 5 minutes and 24 seconds.
5.5 minutes, roughly.
Roughly. But it's crucial to add that about 30% of men report frequent issues with premature ejaculation, so that average hides variation.
Okay, and for women?
For women, when they do orgasm during partnered intercourse, the average time reported is about 14 minutes.
14 minutes, compared to the 5.5 for men.
Yes. And remember, the average duration of penetration itself in couples is often cited as only 3 to 5 minutes.
So that alone explains a lot about the orgasm gap during intercourse. There often just isn't enough time focused on what works for her.
Precisely. However, during masturbation, women report reaching orgasm much faster, around 8 minutes on average.
Much quicker when they have direct control.
Seems that way. And then the duration of the orgasm itself, as we mentioned, Male orgasms typically range from maybe 6 seconds up to almost a minute, while female orgasms are generally longer, maybe 17 to 35 seconds.
Reinforcing that idea of quicker, maybe stronger for men, longer, perhaps less intense peak for women, generally speaking?
That's the common perception reflected somewhat in the average durations, yeah.
Okay, got it. Now, for something many aspire to, multiple orgasms. How common is that experience, really?
It's definitely a known phenomenon, especially for women. The data suggests a significant portion, 43% of women, report having experienced multiple orgasms.
43%. So nearly half of women have had that happen.
That's what the surveys indicate. And while it's not the norm for every encounter, it's certainly achievable for many.
Are there stats on, like, how many multiples?
There are some pretty impressive, though rare, figures. About 8% of women report having had more than 10 orgasms in a single sexual session.
More than 10.
And even rarer, about 2% report having over 20 in one session.
Wow. That's quite something. A reminder of the body's potential for pleasure, I guess.
Absolutely. It shows the incredible range of experiences possible.
Okay, fascinating. Lastly, let's touch on a couple of other interesting correlations the research brought up. What about cannabis? Does that affect orgasms?
Yes, there's research on that. Generally, people report stronger orgasms when using cannabis. For women specifically, studies suggest cannabis use is linked to more satisfying orgasms.
More satisfying for women. Any effect for men?
It's a bit more complex for men. Some data suggests that daily cannabis use is actually correlated with higher rates of both premature ejaculation and difficulty reaching orgasm.
Oh, so a potential downside with heavy, regular use for men.
That's what some studies indicate, yeah. Needs more research, but it's a noted correlation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what about male prostate orgasms? That's something you don't hear about as often.
Right. Men who have experienced orgasm through prostate stimulation often report it as being more pleasurable, sometimes significantly more so, than orgasm from purely penile stimulation.
More pleasurable.
Ow. That's the subjective report, yes. And there's another potential benefit. Some research shows a statistically significant positive link between the frequency of ejaculation, potentially including prostate-induced ones, and a lowered risk of developing prostate cancer.
Lowered cancer risk. That's a pretty compelling reason to explore that pathway to pleasure.
It certainly adds another dimension to understanding male sexuality and health, yes. It really broadens the scope beyond the most obvious forms of stimulation.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here. From that persistent orgasm gap and why it exists.
The crucial role of the clitoris.
Right. To how much relationship status matters for women's orgasm.
A huge factor.
And even digging into why people fake orgasms and the surprising stats around that.
It really paints a picture of just how diverse human sexual experience is. There's no single right way. And hopefully understanding these statistics, these patterns, isn't just about knowing facts. It's about having better tools for communication, empathy.
Yeah, in relationships.
Exactly. In relationships, it helps us question assumptions, appreciate that different people have different needs and different paths to satisfaction.
So the final thought for you listening, how might really understanding these differences, the different timelines, the different needs, the impact of familiarity, how might that change the conversations you have about pleasure? Could it shift expectations, maybe lead to more open dialogue, and ultimately more satisfying experiences for everyone involved? What questions does all this data stir up for you?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Lots to think about.